Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Your Little Castle show. I have the pleasure of learning a lot, and I get to talk to experts. In the building here, Cheun Insurance, Michael Cheun. Michael, you're an expert in senior insurance.
Yeah, Carter, I deal with just strictly insurance for seniors. I think over the years I've realized that, you got to make sure that you choose the right plan, right? Because, medical expenses don't get cheaper as the years go on. So you got to make sure that whatever it is that you choose is going to be important for you down the road, whether it's 12 months or whether it's 3 years, right?
Sure.
Over the years I've seen a lot of people go through their savings or go into the 401k or whatever it is and never anticipated the cost, oh my gosh, didn't think it's this going to be this expensive, and I think that, lack of planning or lack of knowledge is something that people don't realize that, just talking to somebody, right?
Get an expert,
5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever the segment is in terms of what concerns you, whether it's a hospitalization or whether it's something catastrophic. I was talking to one of your assistants earlier, right? Going into a nursing home. That is something that you think about it, right? Somebody works 30, 40, 50 years in the rain, wake up in the rain, in the snow, in the sun, and everything, right? And to accumulate what they have, and over the course of 30 or 40 or 50 years, they scrimp and they save whatever little bit of money that they save accumulates over the years, and they spend it over a 3-year period at a facility.
That's true. I have personally experienced this. Ladies and gentlemen, experts we get to talk to here. With that in mind, we're all trying to build our little castle.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have our own little world, our own little castle. Your castle would not be complete without great furniture. We appreciate our sponsors, Carroll House Furniture, because you like nice things. Michael, where do you like nice things? And especially when you want to be healthy and happy while you enjoy that nice thing in your house, in your little castle. So Brooke liked what I did there. Brooke and Amy, thank you guys for sponsoring the show, because we're always looking for those leaders in our community that are making a difference to impact this little planet. So thank you to Brooke and Amy. Now, you can't be happy in your little castle unless you have the right health.
Yeah,
you want to make sure that you're not. You said it well. Personal story. A lot of people know I've been dating a gal for some time. We're going up close to 10 years now. And we all thought the whole marriage thing people talk to us about is like, hey, we've seen what happens when people get married. I don't know if that's always the best path, but we've been gone through a lot together. She's been through enough. Without getting too much of the specifics, she had a father who ended up having a disease that kept it to where he couldn't live on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ended up in a facility.
Mm-hmm.
He actually moved from facility to facility to facility, looking for that great price versus the care.
Mm-hmm.
It's always somewhere around generally $7,000 to $10,000 a month.
Yeah, ever since COVID, I think it's just spiked up. Ever since COVID, and just like what you're saying, me coming from an Asian culture, right? I was always, I grew up in a very traditional household, where the culture itself, meaning that I'm the eldest son. We're supposed to take care of our elders, right? The thing I always tell people is that talking about taking care of your mom and dad or your grandma or your grandpa isn't like what it was 50 years ago in even in this society, right? Much less in the society that I came from, which is I'm an immigrant to this country, back so
you came over here in the 80s.
Yeah, 1980. Yeah, 1980. I was just a kid, grew up here, and everything I know is here. But I was getting at is that a lot of parents today, they've been very independent through their lives, right? And they don't want to put their kids in an imposition to impose on their schedule, or just they don't want to put them between a rock and a hard space when it comes to taking care of them.
Right. It's a financial burden, no matter which way you look at it. If you have a facility that they can be taken care of, that's one thing.
Yeah.
Or you can put them in the house. My dad went to heaven not too long ago, and my mom mentioned me. Says, "Yeah, Dad said that one day, Carter, I'm going to be living with you."
Yeah, and you know what?
I guess it's an option, right?
Yeah, it is. My parents live with me. But the thing of it is that my parents are still very independent. and they do their thing, and we do our thing. My wife and I do our thing, and but as a kid to somebody, okay, as a kid, right? I think all of us are kids to parents at one time, right? There's nothing I wouldn't do for my parents, okay?
Right.
But I think as parents, though, because I have 2 kids of my own, okay, as parents, I think there is a line that we don't want to cross when it comes to dignity or whatever it is that you want to chalk it up to be, right?
Sure.
Meaning that
Quality of life.
yeah, quality of life. But then again, I don't want to have my kids give me a bath either.
Right.
Or take me to the bathroom or whatever that private moment moment is in your life, right?
Sure.
So I always caution people to kind of think outside the box for a second. You being a kid or you being a parent, right? What is that do you want your kids to do for you or being a kid, right? Do you really want to give your mom and dad or whoever it is a bath? Yeah, I think moms and dads today, they don't want that from their kid. Now, they'll have somebody else to come in that they don't know them, right?
Right.
They'd rather have somebody else they don't know to do that for them, but I think they don't want their family members to do that. I think a lot of the people that I sit down and talk to, that's the general consensus in terms of what they think.
Well, that's where we want to have this discussion here, because it's something I've personally dealt with on a couple levels through my girlfriend and through my own father. And this is what we're going to talk about. Essentially, what you're helping people to do is plan for their retirement.
Yeah.
Essentially, plan for their time when they're on their own, but they need to have the right insurance, the right coverage.
Yeah.
To make sure that they don't have a big gap where they're going, holy cow, we can't even take care of them ourselves. We're going to, government going to step in. How does this happen? What are the scenarios that people have to where they have to? What are their options?
Well, Carter, I think a lot of people don't realize, right? You have a health portfolio, or you should have a health portfolio. Just like somebody has an investment portfolio, right? They want to be diversified. They want to make sure they don't have all their eggs in one basket. So when you look at your health portfolio, there's different categories, okay, of what you should look at. The first category is that, well, what's going to happen to me if I land myself in a hospital? Because that's the first and foremost place, right? If something happens to you, that's where you're going to go, is going into the hospital. But from the hospital, where are you going to go? Okay, are they going to send you home, or are they going to send you to a facility, right? What's the cost behind all of that? And you also, on top of that, you're talking about coming home. Well, okay, coming home is a different story, because here's the thing. What your definition of what you think home care should be isn't what the government's home care definition is,
Right.
So when it comes down to it, you need to understand the definitions of what the government thinks, what is care for you, and what you think care is for yourself, okay? And on top of that, that's post-hospital care, but what happens if something catastrophic happens? Oh my gosh, over the last 2 or 3 years, you're talking about catastrophic things, cancer isn't anything new, right? I mean, cancer plans are not any new revelations. There's not anything new when it comes to the cancer thing. But I think because of COVID or whatever the situation may be, cancer is really a big topic for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, if you haven't been affected by cancer, then you haven't been on this planet very long.
I'm telling you, yeah, everybody, me personally, my family, yeah, we have been affected by cancer. My grandmother died of leukemia, back in '87 at Big Barnes, and coming from an immigrant family, we didn't know what cancer was. We didn't have medical records or whatever it is. When we come to the United States, it's a clean slate. There's no medical records that we can actually refer to say, hey, you know what, your great grandparents had this, right?
Oh, it's another benefit of being in this country. I didn't realize
yeah, really it is. People don't realize that from an immigration standpoint, how great this country really is, right? I mean, talking about land of opportunity, but it's all about making sure that you kind of think outside the box at times when you make decisions.
Well, let's talk a little bit about it. I want to give a little bit of the background here, because this gentleman here, Michael Cheun, right?
Yeah, absolutely
Cheun.
right. Yep.
It's spelled Cheun.
Yeah.
Cheun.
Yeah.
But I my background a little bit. A lot of people know I managed the email systems for Anheuser-Busch, so I was the operations specialist, and my mentor, who was the designer, he would design it, talk to Microsoft, talk to Compaq, talk on HP, and said, this is how his name was. Cheun,
Mm-hmm.
I'll say his last name, he's a buddy of mine, Cheun Su. And Cheun literally became a mentor to me and helped me come through. And I was 27 years old, responsible for the corporate email systems after answering phones and graduating. But the background he had was as a specialist. It's kind of likewise. Is this a specialist? Because if is the last name Cheun, does it mean specialist? What does that mean?
No, actually,
it seems that you're on the ball. I'm just trying to draw an analogy. Very knowledgeable. Knew what he was talking about. Likewise, you had to specialize. You've learned a lot about this specific industry.
Yeah.
Because you help people.
Yeah.
In a way that most people don't realize.
Yeah, and I think that this is what I do for a living, right? I eat and sleep and swim this every single day.
Right.
And I'm not a plumber on the side, or I fix roofs on the side, or whatever it is. So over the course of many, many decades, you have a lot of experience, especially talking to different people and really just kind of hearing different stories. And I think at the end of the day, right, people don't know how to start a conversation. Meaning that they don't know what other people are doing unless they actually talk to somebody like you. Like I told you earlier, this is all brand new to me. If you're talking about technology, this is above my pay grade. But unless I talk to you, though, I'm not going to learn about how people like me could utilize somebody like you to be able to help me and reach out to other people, right? And I think that a lot of people out there that I sit down and talk to, when you talk about insurance in general, right, or health plans in general, we're all human beings at the end of the day, right? We cut ourselves, we all bleed red. So we're not aliens. We don't live forever. We all become sick, hurt, or disabled one time or another. Yeah. And people want to know, hey, what happens to people like me if something should ever happen, right? If I go into the hospital, how do I avoid a big bill, right? Or what happens if I come down with something that is truly catastrophic, right? That is going to be a big ticket item for me, So us, we just share stories and we share what other people are doing because I deal with the big, the general population. So over the years, you always hear stories, and I think the stories really help people kind of navigate their way through health.
Yeah, because those are real life scenarios with here's what happened with somebody specifically and how they dealt with it and what it did to them. Is it true? Take note on this one. I think we're going to get a note taker on this one.
Yeah.
The number one cause of bankruptcy.
I think it's the number one bank of medical for sure. As a matter of fact, over the years, I have a lot of people. They don't go bankrupt, but what they do is that they go into the state system, meaning that hypothetically in a scenario where somebody, let's say over the course of a 30 or 40 year period, right, they save up $500,000, over their retirement account, and then, something happens to the husband and wife or even one individual, and they're in a home, go to a facility, unless they have ways to pay out to that facility, have a plan or insurance plan of some sort to pay for it, you're paying out of pocket for it. Right? So let's hypothetically say you spend 30 years working and you save up $450,000. Let's just say you go into the home and each month costs you $8,000-9,000, not including incidentals, by the way. That's just the cost to be there, right? And let's just chalk it up to $10,000 a month. That's $120 a year. You go through 4 years of it. It's all your savings that you worked up for 30 years. And then you become part of the state system, which is Medicaid, right? That means you go into business with Uncle Sam, right? And they're always going to be in your pocket, okay? Wow. So unless you know how to protect yourself against something like that, over the years, I've seen a lot of people get themselves between a rock and a hard place really quick. That's
where we put the hat on, is if you're talking about the community, that's literally why this show exists. I wanted to help small business owners to express themselves. I've been on television now thousands of times. Have you seen all over the shows we've done over the last 8 years? And as I began to realize, my master's degree is in media communications. So I realized that if you cannot communicate well, then the rest there's no point. It doesn't matter how awesome you are, how knowledgeable you are, if nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give a spotlight to the leaders in our community. And so we crossed paths. I'm not sure how exactly it was, but I might have been one of my reps.
One of your reps called me
and said, hey, we need to find an expert for this particular type of industry because this is a problem.
Yeah.
That one of my assistants, I think that was Dawn, and Dawn does a great job researching to figure out who are the experts in our community. So thank you for coming on the show to talk to us about it.
I appreciate it.
It literally is a matter of depleting. We spent an hour setting up for the show, getting everything right, getting all the bells and whistles tied in here to make sure we portray Michael in the light that he is as an expert, because we want people to see that. And we started talking about it is that it became as part of the discussion right before we started the show, $7,000 a month.
Oh yeah,
on the low end.
Oh yeah, low end for sure.
And for somebody to have a facility or go to a state-run facility, and I guess there's still costs there.
Yeah.
So how does it get tied? I don't even know how that works.
Well,
I just know we were dealing with in two scenarios. One where the parent went to the facility and
Mm-hmm.
$7,000 a month. The other where they had care for my father in home,
Mm-hmm.
but it was still an exorbitant fee. And somebody would come to the house when my mom was not available, when I wasn't available. My sister and I helped quite a bit, but mom was the one there primary.
Yeah.
But she wasn't even available all the time.
Right.
And so they had a long-term care thing going on there. How does this all work together? What are people really putting at stake when they don't plan these things out?
You know, I think that just having a conversation, right? I mean, you don't actually, now it's good that if you can have some sort of a plan in place, but at least have the conversation of the what ifs and when, because a lot of times people try to avoid a conversation or try to avoid a topic, and to them they're like, oh my gosh, it's just bad karma to talk about things, and it might happen if we talk about it. It's going to happen regardless whether you talk about it or not, if it's going to happen, right? So yeah, I think first off, it's just having a conversation, sitting with somebody like myself to say, hey, okay, Carter, here's your health portfolio, right? Your health portfolio consists of this, this, and this, okay? Now, you got to get through each of those sections in terms of, okay, well, what happens if you go into the hospital? Okay, you may have all things taken care of when it comes to hospitalization. When they say, hey, Carter, you can't stay here no more at the hospital, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here anymore. Right. So what do you do, right? They're going to either send you home or go to a facility of some sort. Well, from a rehab standpoint, a facility is fine from a rehab standpoint because they're going to get you in and out, right? But if you want to make an address out of it, they're not going to pay. Who's going to pay for you when you want to make an address out of a facility, right?
Is it true what I've heard? And we're getting off of our normal list of questions here because this is a pretty in-depth, intense topic of discussion that literally can deplete a family of all of their finances.
Absolutely.
It can run them out of money. We had a discussion, I'll just, without naming any names specifically, another scenario where this person had done very well and had a couple $1 million in the bank, but at the rate they were going, then they did pass at a relatively young age compared to the normal life expectancy. And they're like, because this particular occurrence happened at a relatively young age in their early mid-60s, they were looking at like within 10 years, all that $2 million would be gone potentially because they hadn't planned to have. What kind of a policy, and not giving can't do specifics obviously, but how are these covering people from the perspective of when they sit down with you, you say, here are your options. You've got a myriad here. And they say, this is the best one for you. And then do they pay for this monthly? They pay it, and I guess there's plan A, B, C, D.
Yeah, I mean,
How does that play out for people? What do they need to understand?
When you talk about outside of medical coverage, right? Because when you're talking about going to the facility, that has nothing to do with medical, right? This is post-hospital, okay?
Okay. So
yeah, when it comes to different programs, they do have different options. You could scale it up or down to what your budget is, right? Okay. But yeah, I mean, back today, today's programs when it comes to somebody going into a facility, okay, it is totally different than what it was when I first got into the industry in '99. Okay, back then, when you talk about long-term care stuff, it was almost like a novelty thing. It's very inexpensive. People, they're giving lifetime benefits and all that good stuff, right? Today, these insurance companies, they're not making as much money as they think they're going to make from that. From back in the day, the insurance company think that, oh, you know what, somebody will take up a program and, they'll pay us for a few years, right? And they'll cancel it. Oh, well, if you cancel your insurance, they don't have to return your premiums back to you, right? Right. So it's just free money through the insurance companies. And come to find out, a lot of people who took out plans back in the day, they're now utilizing them. Not only that they kept it, now they're using them, right? So, I mean, these insurance...
talked about my mom had.
Yeah.
She said, Carter, we were paying for this.
Yeah.
I said, Mom, was it Dad that told you to do this? She's like, No, it was me. I saw what happened to my mother.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that to happen to me. And so we put a plan on both of us. It was a long time ago. So you're saying the game has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, it has.
You better have an expert you're talking to.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Because I think, because I deal with many companies, right? And I think that a lot of the insurance companies today, you're not going to find a lot of insurance companies out there that's going to offer you lifetime benefits, right? They really scale back in terms of, the time period that they will allow you to purchase insurance for. And again, there's a lot of different holes and the different, trying to put the peg in the hole, right? I mean, it's a whole new big puzzle. Okay, so it's really hard to just kind of go over different scenarios over a course of a few minutes. You know what I mean? So yeah, absolutely. I always encourage people. It doesn't cost nothing to talk to somebody like myself. And call whatever it is. And I don't try to bug people about their insurance. They call me and say, hey, what are people doing when it comes to the home care? Well, this is what they're doing, right? There's people out there that has their own definition of home care, like I told you earlier, right? What your definition of home care isn't what the government's definition of home care is, right? So when it comes down to it, you just have to know the definition of things. Whether it's a home care scenario, whether it's a facility scenario, or even medical situation where you go into the hospital, you better know what you're paying for. You better know what your out-of-pocket is. Just because you go in the hospital, yeah, they're going to take care of you. They're not going to let you die. But guess what? When you come home, there might be a big bill waiting for you.
Right. And this is why you have to talk to somebody. My dad talked to me years ago about, Carter, one day you will specialize. So I specialize in marketing. I can show you all kinds of whimsical things that made me the #1 sales rep and ran email systems for Anheuser-Busch. Big companies, I was #1 rep. And the reason I was good at that is because I drilled into very specific details to where you could analyze, improve the data and the information. Likewise, here we're talking about if you don't have a specialist that doesn't understand exactly where this money gets spent, what this deductible does, what this variable, what this copay does, and then all of the things that I don't even know where to start with this. You start talking to me, I'm going, Michael, I think we're going to become friends here because if we're not already, right? Because literally this can be something that depletes all resources for an entire family. My mom is still around, and we're starting to talk about it because she's 80. She looks like she's 45. How about that?
Yeah, there you go. Good save.
And she's proud of the fact that she actually still they just had a whole article about her on the front page of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Go look it up a couple weeks ago. It's on my website, cardinalcowboy.com, if you like the community stuff we do. And she's proud of the fact that she worked for 60 years. 40 years as a teacher, 20 years in retirement, still working for the district, still working part-time, but still teaching.
Yeah.
And so they made this kind of when you're 60 years in, now you're getting close, right?
Yeah.
She didn't start when she was 2. She started when she was in her 20s.
Yeah.
And so now she's at that point where literally these are critical things you must start to consider. And if you're not calculating these things, I know the potential inheritance I'm going to get. It's billions. Billions. I wish it was. But we have to really start to fathom. My mom said to me the other day, she's joking, but she goes, Carter, I'm going to spend all of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it might be, and I hate to even say this, from the perspective that she might spend all of it not on her leisure,
right?
Potentially in a facility
for care,
just for basic care, not
just
to
care,
say here's a life-saving operation that needs to happen.
Yeah.
But here's something that, like, on a monthly basis, my assistant over here, Jeremy, works at a facility. We won't talk about publicly, we don't get permission before we mention companies, whatever. But literally, when you're in a long-term facility, it is $6,000, $7,000, $8,000.
Oh, absolutely.
How do people best prepare for that? What are you going to explain to them that they should be doing on a monthly basis, or how do you? And that's where you have that sit down, or
I think there's a lot of different options to go about that, right? Because when you're talking about getting something in place where they're paying a monthly premium, and we're talking not $20 a month, right? You're talking about pretty hefty premiums. But then again, you think about it, right? Let's hypothetically say you pay $300 a month, for a premium. Well, it's $300 a day if you went into a facility. You know what I mean? So what you pay in 1 month is what the insurance company is going to pay on your behalf in 1 day.
Wow.
That's perspective, right?
Right.
So I tell people all the time, over the years I always hear people, oh yeah, I'm going to save that $100, put that in the bank and get interest or whatever it is. Well, it's $1,200 a year. you're not going to make that much interest from the bank, right? First of all, okay?
No, we all
and trust me, when something bad happens to you when it comes to medical, $1,200 is a drop in the bucket. Literally a drop in the bucket, okay? So it's kind of like understanding how people are really just kind of navigating their way through things, you know?
Yep.
And I think that a lot of people, unless they know what other people are doing, it's really hard for them to say, okay, wow, okay, this guy's doing this over here. Maybe I'm in that scenario, right? Maybe I should just kind of hear about his story. How is he protecting himself, or what did he get himself into from a trouble standpoint because he didn't do that?
Yeah,
you know,
the good thing about life is you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so in 1 minute you got somebody's healthy. I imagine right now, I think about this. I'm 53, coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And I realized that, man, if I had some kind of just debilitating issue, then I would be in big trouble, and my money I've saved up might be going away pretty quickly.
Yeah,
you've got to plan for that as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, us as human beings, right? History show that we don't get healthier as we get older in life. You know,
Right.
It's just a matter of time until when something happens. Not matter if it ever happens. You know,
Right.
And I think that's what that's one of the important things I try to convey to people, right? You know, because over the years you always have the people that's always been healthy, right? Never took medication, and they're like, up to their 65th birthday, they're, you know, yeah, I've been great, nothing's ever happened, and, you know, boom, 2-3 years later, you know, you hear the phrase, when it rains it pours, right? And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it's like going down the slippery slope. They go down to the slippery slope, and it just snowballs, you know, and bad things happens one after another, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I never realized that's going to happen to me, you know? And I get that all the time, to be honest with you. It's not something new.
Yeah, I guess that's something people need to be paying close attention to, because ultimately, as we run out here, will you stick around for another half hour? We can talk a little bit more here. I've got a lot more questions. One, I wanted to talk about what sets you apart. I mean, as an expert, you've got to be something you do a little bit better than the rest, and I want you to answer that question in just a second. But on the second show, if I get Michael to stick around here, we're going to talk about the one big mistake people make, and then I want to get a cost analysis. I kind of dabbled with it there, $300 a month for something that they're going to be paying $300 a day.
Yeah.
Well, help me keep that in perspective, because that's a big difference. But if you would, before we finish up this first half hour, tell me, what sets you apart from the rest? What do you do better that you think helps you to specialize?
You know, there's a lot of people out there that do what I do, and I come across a lot of people over the years, and I was like, hey, you know, yeah, I want to think that I do a great service for individuals, right? Meaning that I go over the details that they themselves don't want to talk about, you know, and for me, it's more of, okay, well, I think sometimes I care so much that I become very anal. You know, when it comes like, you know, you could tell me, Carter, and say, hey, I'm not going to worry about that. But I was like, you know what, Carter, you should, right? And as long as the conversation's been had, I'm good with whatever decisions you make, you know. And I think over the years, I think I've seen a lot of scenarios, and I've seen a lot of bad things happen to good people. So from a passion standpoint, for me anyway, okay, I would like to think that I'm very passionate about making sure that people maintain a certain lifestyle.
We've got to cut you off right there, everybody. We got to finish this up. We're going to talk more with Michael. Stay tuned for more, everybody. Great stuff.